action. Happy New Year. Welcome back to Show and Tell. I'm Billy and I'm your host. You can find me on Ravelry and Instagram at billietoy, and I'll put the spelling on the screen for you. It'll also be in the show notes below. The first thing that I wanted to mention as we kick off the new year is that I am about to kick off another knit-along. I've had 2 knit-alongs before. I did the Elsa Schiaparelli's cardigan and the Genie recently completed. And now I'm about to venture into a very unusual pattern. We're going to talk a lot about this pattern because there's a lot to say about it. Historically, it's a well-known sweater. It's one of the earliest examples of a sweater designed by a couturier, Elsa Schiaparelli, who was born in Rome in 1890. And her family seemed to be a fairly prominent family, an intellectual, well-educated family. Her uncle was an astronomer. Her mother was a descendant of the Medicis. And when she was old enough to study philosophy, she published a collection of sensual poems. And for that, she was sent off to a convent in Switzerland. And she hated being there and went on a hunger strike. Not long after leaving the convent, she went to London to help someone raise their children, I guess sort of like a nanny. And she was attending a conference, and the speaker was this kind of mystical fortune teller person. They met and fell in love, married in 1914, and left Europe in 1916 for New York. As luck would have it, on the ship taking them to New York, Elsa met a woman named Gabrielle Picabia, whose husband was a famous Dada painter. This was the beginning of Elsa's entree into the world of the Surrealists and the Dadaists. She became friendly with Salvador Dali and his wife, Man Ray, and other avant-garde artists. Long story short, her husband was in trouble with the law. The FBI was after him. He was a bit of a charlatan, and he left her with this daughter. And she finds herself back in Europe, in Paris. One day she went with a friend to the atelier of Poiret, another couturier. And while she was waiting for her friend to be fitted, she tried on some of the garments. Poiret thought that she would make a great advertisement, so he sent her off with some of his clothing to wear. By 1927, she was at the beginning of designing her own line. And the first line that she did was, it seems, a line of sweaters. Her first atelier was on the Rue de la Paix, and the sign on the door said, Schiaparelli pour le sport. In other words, sportswear. Besides sweaters, she had designed swimsuits, beach pajamas, and some accessories. I think the story goes that one day she was sitting in a restaurant wearing one of her sweaters that had a trompe l'oeil motif, and a buyer from New York for one of the big department stores saw it and said, we'll take 40 of those. And she had to scurry around to find Armenian people who were able to do the type of knitting that was in her sweater. By 1934, she was so well known in the United States that Time magazine put her on the cover. By that time, the couture house had become known as Schiaparelli pour le sport, pour la ville, pour le soir. sportswear, city, and evening wear, and she employed over 400 people, eventually moving to larger quarters at the Place Vendôme, a 5-floor building with 98 rooms, and now she had 700 employees. Her famous clients included Katharine Hepburn, Marlene Dietrich, Lauren Bacall, Greta Garbo, Vivian Leigh, Ginger Rogers, Mae West. Now there's a funny story about Mae West. Mae West had sent her a dummy of her figure so that Elsa could make clothes that would fit her form. And they ultimately used that dummy to form the shape of the perfume bottle that she named Shocking. In fact, she invented the color Shocking Pink, which became her signature color. She had many firsts, including being the first designer to launch a line of sunglasses, designer sunglasses. In 1954, she closed down her salon in order to write her autobiography. And I wanted to read you a few excerpts from that autobiography, especially the parts that talk about the sweaters. So here's a quote. A woman friend, an American, came to see me one day. She was always very smart, and on this occasion wore a sweater that, though plain, was different from any I had yet seen. I myself had never been able to wear sweaters or sports clothes. When I dressed for the country, I was sure to look my worst. So much of a scarecrow, in fact, that I expected even the birds of the fields to fly away from me. The sweater my friend was wearing intrigued me. It was hand knitted and had what I might call a steady look. Many people have said and written that I started in business sitting in a window in Montmartre and knitting. In fact, I hardly knew Montmartre, and I had never been able to knit. The art of holding and clicking those two little metal needles and making them produce something has always been a mystery to me, and indeed remains so. I did not try to learn, being convinced that the result of anything I did along those lines would strangely and vividly resemble a piece of Swiss cheese. This sweater, which intrigued me, was definitely ugly in color and shape, and though it was a bit elastic, it did not stretch like other sweaters. Where did you get it? I asked. Her friend responded, a little woman. The little woman turned out to be an Armenian peasant who lived with her husband. I went to see them, became friends, and have remained so ever since. I visit them occasionally at their small factory where they make knitted goods for the wholesale trade. If I make a design, will you try to copy it? I asked. We will try. So I drew a large butterfly bow in front, like a scarf around the neck, the primitive drawing of a child in prehistoric times. I said, the bow must be white against a black ground, and there will be white underneath. The poor darlings, not at all disturbed by such a mad idea, struggled to work it out. Indeed, this was something I was to discover throughout my career, that people would always follow my ideas enthusiastically and try without discussion to do what I told them. The sweater was not a success. It came out lopsided and not at all attractive. It could have fitted Gogo, that's Schiaparelli's daughter. The second was better. The third, I thought, was sensational. Trying courageously not to feel self-conscious, convinced deep within me that I was merely glamorous, I wore it at a smart lunch and created a furor. Women at that time were very sweater-minded. Chanel had, for quite a few years, made machine-knitted dresses and jumpers. This was different. All the women wanted one immediately. They fell on me like birds of prey. But the woman from whom I accepted the first order was a New York buyer for Strauss. She asked me for 40 sweaters and 40 skirts. Remembering the story of Ali Baba and the 40 thieves and the 1001 Nights in my father's library, I impudently said, yes. I had no idea how they were going to be made within a fortnight, as I had promised them, by this Armenian peasant and her husband, nor did I know where the skirts would come from and what they would look like. My Armenian woman and I held a council, and we scouted through Paris for Armenian volunteers. The colony must have been unexpectedly large because we gathered quite a number together in no time. They learned quickly, and as long as I paid for the wool, they did not mind waiting for their wages. The large bow was repeated in many colors, but mostly in black and white. The skirts were the big problem. What were they to be made of, and who would make them? A young French girl in the neighborhood had sometimes helped me with my dress problems. We talked it over and decided to make the skirts absolutely plain, no fantasy at all, but a trifle longer than fashion demanded. That was just to the knees. And it goes on. The skirts were not knit. In August of 1936, Elsa did an interview with Photoplay about how a woman could be chic on a small income. And I think I'll try and put an image of the article here so you can pause this recording and stop and read the whole thing if you're interested. But I just wanted to pluck out one little quote because it pertains to sweaters. A good sweater should be in every girl's wardrobe, of course, for weekends in the country and general sports. Similarly, in a New York Times article later that year, there are two things that I thought were noteworthy. And again, I'll try and put the article here so you can read the full thing. But she said she believed in quality rather than quantity. I had mentioned this in one of my earlier episodes about a French cousin of mine who had told me that she had very few garments, but she would mix and match things and just put a scarf or some other accessory to change it up so it looked like she had much more than she actually did have. But she would buy good things that would last and very classic things. So Schiaparelli said, I believe in quality rather than quantity, and it is possible for one of means to have too many clothes. The fewer clothes, the better, I think, as long as those you have are of good quality. If a woman has too many clothes, she gets in a muddle, and the chances are that she might choose the wrong accessories. You be the judge. Less is more, or more is more. You know what camp I'm in. She also described what every woman should have in her wardrobe, and you'll get a kick out of this. One fur coat, one tweed suit, a dark tailored suit, because she felt you could go anywhere in a suit. You could go from day until evening in a proper nice suit. A silk dress for afternoon wear, at least 4 hats. I have mine right here. And as many more as she can afford. 6 pairs of shoes and all the accessories to suit. I found it funny that she came to New York to shop in the 5 and dime stores. And with that, I'll refer you to the whole episode that I did on Frank W. Woolworth. Maybe she went shopping at Woolworth's. There are 2 other quotes I wanted to share with you from Elsa Schiaparelli. In difficult times, fashion is always outrageous. The other quote is, good clothes, simply made, never date. It's so French. In fact, when I used to go to Paris and Milan, when I was importing costume jewelry, people would comment to me that the difference between the French and the Italians, who were both very well known for their fashion, is that the French prefer more classic things that won't go out of style next season, and the Italians are much more daring. You might even say avant-garde. I remember being on a tour of Italy, and at one of our little bus stops, I quickly ran into a boutique because I'd heard about someplace called Wilma Spagnoli. And while we were just on a rest break, I managed to buy myself a purple blouse and matching purple and olive green trousers. I had never seen purple and green in this country. In fact, even now, I would say it's not a very popular color combination. And one of the accessories that I imported were gloves sometimes. And from Italy, I have a beautiful pair of gloves. I should really get them to show you, that are magenta with red cuffs. Another very unusual Italian combination. The Italians are really famous, and Elsa Schiaparelli herself was famous for this, for using unusual materials, putting things together that you wouldn't expect to see, like leather and lace or diamonds and rubber. And I think that Schiaparelli, I think I read that, was it Diana Vreeland, had a garment made by her of some unusual material, and she took it to the dry cleaner to have it clean. I'm sure she took it to the best place in New York, but the material just melted when it came in contact with the cleaning solutions. So she was cutting edge, much like Frank Lloyd Wright was in architecture. He was using materials that leaked because he was so far ahead of his time. Today, there probably wouldn't be a problem, but things had not yet been perfected. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed this foray into the life and times of Elsa Schiaparelli, who, by the way, died in 1973. I hope you'll join us on January 15th, or whenever you discover this, in trying to knit your own Schiaparelli sweater. See you then. As I've mentioned before on this podcast, I live in New York City, home of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Met owns quite a few Schiaparelli items, and I wanted to give you a very quick run through. There are hundreds of them. I'll do a quick scroll through, and then if you're interested, you can always go to their website. So let me try and skip through, because there's quite a lot of these. I won't go too fast. When I get to a sweater, like that one on the left, which I've shown before, I'll try and pause when I get to those. This bolero looks like it might be a sweater. This is a sweater. Here's another couple of cuties. You can get a lot of ideas looking at things like this. Some of you may know that I keep a file of inspiration. There's another sweater. This is a very famous shoe hat. She collaborated with Salvador Dali on that one. Sweater, sweater. It's very pretty. shocking pink sweater. Choose another sweater. Hat. I don't know if it's knit. Looks like it might be. Well, I hope you enjoyed that quick little tour through the Met's collection of Schiaparelli. I'm going to sign out now and wish everybody a happy new year. See you soon, I hope. And I'm looking forward to those of you who are going to join me on January 15th to kicking off the knit-along on the Elsa Schiaparelli Bowknot Sweater. See you then. Details down below in the show notes.